Tonight, we look at the controversial career of Baroness Margaret Thatcher and new green jobs in the city. That and more on tonight's EBN News. Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Simpson, and this is EBN News. We begin tonight with Mike Ciccone, who's out in Boston live with a story on new green jobs in Massachusetts. What's the story, Mike?
And Carol, states looking to add jobs and boost their economy are looking to the clean energy sector, specifically here in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts is cleaning up on its energy.
We strongly believe that Massachusetts is the leading clean energy sector in the United States.
And we are. The Bay State ranks #1 in clean energy efficiency. In just 1 year, clean energy jobs increased 11.2%.
It felt really good to be creating more jobs and putting people back to work, too.
Craig Dwyer created his own clean energy company as a college student. His incentive, the Green Jobs Act. It gives a 30% tax credit on energy-efficient purchases and was a selling point for Dwyer when President Obama lifted the $2,000 cap on it. Now, Dwyer presented energy-efficient options to homeowners and called unemployed contractors to do the work.
And Massachusetts at the time, and still to this point, they've just done a great job in cultivating a sustainable industry up here.
We are directly investing in clean energy infrastructure here in Massachusetts to really help us be a world leader and to put in place a lasting contribution and support for clean energy sector.
I'm rarely ever the first person to talk to someone about energy and clean energy in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts is using 40 times the amount of solar energy than 6 years ago and producing enough wind power to supply electricity to up to 40,000 homes.
I think the future is very bright for clean energy. Here in Massachusetts, we actually are at the end of the energy pipeline, as we say. We don't have any indigenous coal, oil, or natural gas. And
now, 2% of all jobs in Massachusetts are in the clean energy sector, and 10,000 more are projected to be added next year. Carol, not only is this great news for the economy, but great news for the environment as well. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's just what we need, new jobs in the city. Baroness Margaret Thatcher was an influential and controversial figure as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. CNN reporter Karen Kaffa remembers the Iron Lady.
She was a grocer's daughter who became the first female Prime Minister of Great Britain. Margaret Thatcher was called the Iron Lady for her personal and political strength. The Tory leader swept into office in 1979 with the promise of transforming the British economy, which was suffering from strikes and inflation.
We decided there was no alternative to tough medicine that was going to have to be sustained for some time. And it was accepted, because there was no alternative.
She cut taxes, privatized state industries, and deregulated financial markets. Opponents accused the Prime Minister of widening the gap between the rich and poor. Thatcher also restored Britain's clout in world affairs and built a special bond with her American counterpart and political soulmate, Ronald Reagan. The leaders had their disagreements but shared similar conservative worldviews.
It was closer ideologically and warmer personally than any relationship between any other British Prime Minister and any other American president.
Thatcher convinced Reagan that Mikhail Gorbachev was a Soviet leader they could do business with.
He was willing to admit that some things were wrong in the Soviet Union, which was very unusual.
And Reagan backed the Prime Minister in Britain's 1982 Falklands War with Argentina. The conflict cost 255 British lives and cemented Thatcher's reputation as a resolute leader.
A prime minister never expects to send people into battle. I was agonized over it. But you couldn't leave our people captive of a military junta of the Argentine.
Thatcher was the only British prime minister in the 20th century to serve 3 consecutive terms. In 1990, after a leadership struggle within her own party, Thatcher was forced to resign. Though no longer on the front lines, Thatcher still had political sway as Baroness Thatcher, sitting in Britain's upper chamber, the House of Lords. Later in life, as her health deteriorated, public appearances became rare. But Thatcher's reputation was already set as a dominant figure of the 20th century whose influence is still being felt today. I'm Karen Katha reporting.
South Korea is on high alert while preparing for mid-range missile tests from North Korea. Authorities say that the threats to South Korea are to establish its new leader, Kim Jong-un, as a powerful leader. Missiles have been launched by North Korea in the past, but usually with advance notice to other countries to clear the waters. The threats have escalated due to continued UN sanctions on North Korea and the annual U.S.-South Korean demonstrations. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is making it clear that the U.S. is prepared to respond if North Korea goes through with its continued threats.
North Korea has been, with its bellicose rhetoric, with its actions, have been skating very close to a dangerous line. Our country is fully prepared to deal with any contingency, any action that North Korea may take, or any provocation.
Uruguay is voting to legalize gay marriage. They will be the second Latin American country to do so, and the third in all of the Americas. 71 of the 92 lawmakers in its Congress voted to approve the bill after it was passed by its Senate. Critics of the bill include Christian organizations and the Catholic Church. They say legalizing gay marriage will threaten the sanctity of marriage. President Jose Mujica is expected to sign the bill in the upcoming weeks. A Florida couple accused of abducting their two sons have been arrested. The husband and wife took their boys from the boys' grandmother, who was their caretaker, after the parents lost custody of the two boys. Police accounts say they sneaked into the grandmother's home, tied her up, and fled from there to Cuba with the boys. They are aged 2 and 4 and were placed in foster care for a time when the parents were charged in Louisiana with drug and gun possession. The turning in of the couple is a rare sign of cooperation between U.S. and Cuban authorities. A Texas man who went on a stabbing spree earlier this week attacked his fellow students with such force that blade shards were found in one of his victims. The attacker, identified as 20-year-old Dylan Quick, was a deaf student at Lone Star College. Authorities are revealing that Quick often had fantasies of necrophilia and cannibalism since he was a young boy. Rockefeller impersonator Christian Gerhard Streeter is now convicted of the 1985 murder of John Sohus. Identities before he committed the infamous murder, he most notoriously impersonated being an heir to the Rockefeller fortune. Gerhard Streeter was previously serving time in a Massachusetts prison for kidnapping his then 7-year-old daughter from his ex-wife. He was then extradited to California for the murder case of Sohus, where he is now facing life in prison. A bipartisan compromise on gun control has been announced by Congress. The compromise is seeking to expand background checks for the sale of guns. This compromise could help end the gridlock in Congress over the gun control debate. First Lady Michelle Obama spoke at an event in Chicago and talked about the death of teenager Hadia Pendleton and the need for compromise in Washington. Well, we don't seem to have that piece of tape. Technical difficulties. We'll try to bring it later to you in the broadcast. The agreement could be added as an amendment to existing gun legislation, and this compromise could bring about the largest change in gun control history in nearly 2 decades. 6 Boston, not that story. This story comes first. The Jodi Arias trial continues. A witness for the defense is stating that the victim, Travis Alexander, was extremely afraid of Arias before his death. Prosecutors have used text messages Alexander sent friends saying she was evil. Defense has countered that even after their breakup, Arias and Alexander kept in contact, with Alexander at one point telling Arias that he loved her. Arias shot and stabbed her boyfriend in his Phoenix, Arizona home. She claims that she was a victim of domestic abuse, and when he threatened to kill her, she killed him in self-defense. 6 Boston College students are being accused of the vandalism of an apartment in Brighton. One of the members of the group arraigned was Christian Rockefeller, the great-grandson of the late Vice President Nelson Rockefeller. The vandals broke into the apartment at around 11:30 p.m., where they threw eggs, punched holes in the walls, and urinated on the premises. The damage was the result of a dispute between some of the young men and the apartment's landlord. The students are being charged with breaking and entering and willful and malicious destruction of property. More candidates are throwing their bids in to become Boston's next mayor. The race will be without the current mayor, Thomas Menino, who announced his retirement last week after 4 terms as mayor.
I'm here with the people I love, to tell the city I love that I will leave the job that I love.
Mayor Menino has been Boston's longest-serving mayor, and this new election will see the passing of the torch to one in a new field of candidates. Announcements have come from State Representative Martin Walsh, City Councilors Felix Arroyo, Michael Ross, and Rob Consalvo, Suffolk District Attorney Daniel Connolly, and community organizer Bill Walczak. Now, a 15-year-old Gloucester teen has died from complications after being rescued from a fire in her home. The fire has been ruled an accident. It was started in the victim's brother's bedroom. Heavy toxic smoke overcame the teenager, preventing her escape. Despite being able to rescue and revive her, the teen's health took a turn for the worse, resulting in her death at Mass General Hospital. The Gloucester Fire Department is investigating whether or not all smoke detectors were working at the time. It's off to the races, political races, that is. We've got your Senate and city election coverage when we come back. Our political correspondent, Georgia Ree Godfrey, has the latest on the local and national political stage. Georgia Ree, what's going on?
Thanks, Carol. The race for the Senate will be a close one. Gloves came off as Republican candidates held their first Senate debate. Dan Winslow, former U.S. Attorney General Michael Sullivan, and businessman Gabriel Gomez. Topics range from the issue of gun control to same-sex marriage. Representative Winslow acknowledged that the Senate seat would be a hard spot for Republicans to win. With the announcement of Mayor Menino not seeking a 6th term, one mayoral candidate, John Connolly, has already begun his race for the position platform focusing on education. Reporter Morgan Lynch has the story.
Soon there'll be a new sheriff in town. Mayor.
So, for all he's done and all he will do for Boston, Councilor Connolly.
And Boston City Councilor at Large, John Connolly, has thrown in his education reform-based hat into the ring. Connolly has begun to gather support from older Bostonians by selling his platform of youth and quality education.
He wants to make Boston Public Schools a priority and much better than they are today, which I think is a good idea.
If you're going to talk education reform, why not talk to students? These kids behind me may be a little too young to know what's going on, but I know someone we can talk to.
Sybil Brown didn't know much about Connolly and his platform before he spoke at a convention for the College Democrats of Massachusetts. But so far, she's impressed by his emphasis on education.
I do agree. I mean, I don't think you hear politicians reference education enough as like a single issue. So that was kind of refreshing to hear.
While speaking at the convention, Connolly admitted publicly to having been a mediocre student at Harvard University. But he does not want the same for Boston youth.
What I want Boston to be is a city that takes all of its resources, and we have resources most cities dream of having, and aligns those resources properly to be the first city to close the achievement gap and to draw the middle class back into its public schools in unprecedented numbers.
Connolly says he's not a single-issue candidate, but he's making education reform a cornerstone to his campaign. I'm Morgan Lynch for EBN News, Boston.
Governor Patrick is hoping to find a middle ground between his $1.9 billion tax increase for education and transportation and the $500 million transportation tax hike proposed by House lawmakers. Patrick hopes that they can settle on a total that will balance and allow lawmakers to make effective changes in the transportation landscape and the educational gains that Massachusetts has made. He has stated that he will veto any plan sent to him that does not more closely resemble the one he originally presented. President Obama is releasing his 2014 budget that will leave the nation with a $744 million deficit despite tax hikes and cuts in entitlements. The proposed budget will include $3.77 million in total spending. It will also turn off automatic spending cuts, also known as a sequester, and will raise $1 trillion in new tax revenue. Over 10 years, also going into effect is the famous Buffett rule that will require households that make over $1 million in revenue to pay at least a 30% tax rate even after charitable donations. That's all for your political news. I'm Georgia Godfrey. Back to you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Our correspondent next is Sola Okenla, who has all of the science and tech news in the hub. What do you have, Sola?
Thanks, Carol. The 5th annual Cambridge Science Festival has begun with the hopes of creating the next generation of scientists and engineers. Let's take a look.
Imagine playing Frisbee with a robot. At this year's Cambridge Science Festival, kids of all ages got to play catch with an unusual new playmate at the Robot Zoo.
He shoots the Frisbee and next to fly, and the people's got to catch the Frisbee the robot throw.
The masterminds behind the beloved bot go to Cambridge Ridge and Latin High School. They gave up their Saturday afternoon because they enjoyed the challenge of engineering.
Seeing how people interact and doing software and stuff like that.
Senior Patrick Maltsev enjoyed sharing his passion with the younger children at the Science Festival.
It was fun. I thought it was nice that I was able to help out the kid, like give the kids like inspiration. So they're like, oh, when I get to Cambridge Ridge and Latin, they can continue that tradition of being on the team and achieving more goals. And hopefully get a better robot than we did. I mean, we made it to the semifinals, but maybe in the future we'll win one year.
The robot was built to compete in the FIRST Robotics competition. The team did not make it to the finals, but they're still winners to these kids. For EBN News, I'm Katie O'Donnell.
In vitro pioneer Sir Robert Edwards has passed after battling a long illness. The scientist was most famous for having paved the way for the birth of the first test tube baby in the 70s. Since his breakthrough, an estimated 5 million babies have been born worldwide due to IVF. The procedure involves fertilizing the egg outside of the womb and inserting the embryo in the mother's womb. Edwards wasn't without his naysayers, like the Catholic Church, who disapproved of the procedure. His work earned him a Nobel Peace Prize in 2010. Edwards was 88 at the time of his passing. British cosmologist Stephen Hawking is doubtful that humanity can survive another 1,000 years without looking beyond what planet Earth has to offer. He gave these remarks at a talk about space exploration, and he believes that the Earth's resources are finite and that if discovered, mankind can thrive elsewhere in the universe. Companies like Microsoft have reason to be concerned, and that's because PC sales are in decline. The negative outlook of the PC's future comes from the steepest quarterly decline in computer sales. But even more popular brands like Apple have not been immune from the fall, with their sales having declined by nearly 8%. Analysts believe that this is a sign to major changes coming soon in the tech industry, with major companies being forced to either consolidate or privatize. And that's all your science and tech news.
the latest on the Red Sox and superstar Jay-Z when we return.